Hello, and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in Brevard, North Carolina, broadcasting to you from my house, as usual, on Monday, when I'm technically on a day off of sorts. And we are continuing our work on brioche. This is what I want to review and get you to today. Something that look, we got the knit stitches of one color on one side, and what looks more prominent is the knit stitches of the other color on the other side. Now my sample, as I have trouble flicking this around, has yarn of two slightly different thicknesses and different colors to help you see what's going on. It can help and hurt at times. But we have done, part one was the setup row, part A. Part B was learning the brioche purl or burp row with color B. And then part C was learning the brioche knit row with color A. I want to review everything today to kind of get it in one package. But this is not necessarily the video you should jump to. So this is part D. It's not necessarily the video you should jump to learn all of brioche. I really recommend watching these in succession because some of the pictures and what I'm going to do may not start from the beginning of the row. Going through them step by step, I think, helps a lot. But we will do our best to review everything today. We aren't going to write out necessarily all of the tips and tricks and reminders. I'll try to hit them all, but they were written out in previous videos. So go back and check those out. If something here doesn't make sense or ask me a question, I'll do what I can. All right? Let's get to it. So this is a shot to give you an overview of we're going to look at both knit and purl, and I've drawn it all out and I will post these on Instagram as well. But we will be transitioning to just look at one side at a time. Again, here's the overview with all the reflection from my filming lights before we start this. But let's focus in on knitting. So as we go, I am going to highlight some of the general tips and tricks we should pay attention to. For instance, every row has a mantra, be it the knit row or the purl row. Every row has a repeated phrase. This mantra, this repeated phrase for the knit row, which remember is going to be color pink. Color A is pink, color B is blue. Here's our mantra. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. I like to break it down to as few words as possible. So BRK means brioche knit. Or you might call it a bark for short. YF is for yarn forward. Some will also call it a yarn over. If you are knitting continental style, you may want to call that a yarn over. It might make more sense. And then SL is slip. And remember, you are always slipping purlwise. You always slip purlwise. And remember, purlwise is really a fancy way of saying go straight into the stitch. Don't twist it. Straight in, just moving it over. Okay, brioche knit or bark, yarn forward, slip. Sometimes if you want to break this one down into even a smaller word, you might say wrap. Bark, wrap, slip. I did make a note here. Before you start your row entirely, you do need to do a little bit of setup. Your color A may have fallen away from the last stitch of the previous row. So wrap color A around the base of the last stitch of the previous row to back of work. I did not picture that here. It's in the previous video. But here are our 3 steps. This is the mantra. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. And it just repeats and repeats and repeats. So let's color code this guy. I did note here that this brioche knit is not the beginning of the row because I just want to have a picture of what's going on continually. I do not have this as the beginning of the row. It's in the middle. So therefore, what is happening here is the end of this cycle. So again, that's confusing. Just trust me on this. We'll go through it. Let me color code first. Everything that's color A, I'm going to color in pink. And everything in this picture, this first one that is color B, I'm going to color in blue. Okay, don't worry about this part right now. What's important is to focus on right here is that we are brioche knitting. This BRK, we are brioche knitting. Remember, brioche knit is where you knit the stitch and it's wrapped together. So the stitch and its wrap, the needle has gone into both of those. Your working yarn is going to come up and over and around this back needle. And pulling that yarn through is going to be your brioche knit stitch. That's right here. As we move on to the second step of the yarn forward, what you just completed is right here. So I'll mark it. And now a color code. Once again, everything that is in color A is going to be pink. And everything that's in color B will be blue. From the end of the last repetition, your yarn is in front, it pulls over and creates a wrap when you do that brioche knit. Makes more sense on your second cycle through. Again, this is review from the last video. If this you go, what? You may want to go back and watch the brioche knit video. I believe it was part C. So we did a brioche knit. Second part of the mantra is yarn forward between needles. You might also call this a yarn over or a wrap. This yarn needs to come front between the needles. It's okay if it goes back up over the right needle for this, and continental knitters might want to do that, but this yarn needs to be in front. And part of the reason it needs to be in front, it's where I'll put a green phrase in here. This is a rule for all of brioche. Your yarn needs to be in front before a stitch is slipped, which is what's going to happen next. So the yarn forward in this sequence is so it's ready for what it needs to do there, bringing it to the front. So let's move on to step 3. Slip. Remember what I said up front. All slip stitches happen purlwise. So this stitch is about to get slipped. But first, let's color code. Remember, everything of color A in this is going to be pink. And everything of color B is going to be blue. So this stitch is about to be slipped to the right needle without being twisted while the yarn is in front. That's your yarn front right there, which carries up to here. We'll go over some tips that are relevant here on the other side because they're relevant for both rows. But you slip the stitch, then back to the beginning of the mantra. Brioche knit, yarn is still in front. Don't worry about that. When you brioche knit, it's going to create a wrap of this stitch. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. And if all goes well, you will end your row on a slip. And remember, at the end of the row, you need to lock your last wrap with A by bringing the yarn over the needle and back to the front. what this first step does to the previous stitch will not happen at the very end, because you'll end with a slip, but that slip needs a wrap. That is one of the rules of thumb of brioche. We'll put it over here because there's space. Every slip stitch needs a wrap. And guess what? While we're there, that wrap will always be the other color. We can make some references to this when we're done. For now, let's talk about the purl row. So the purl row is always going to be done with color B, with our blue. And the mantra, as every row has a mantra. Here's the repeated phrase for this row. Things are happening in a slightly different order. We start with a slip, and then a yarn over, and then a brioche purl, which is also called, often, to condense it, a burp. Fewer words make the mantra more repeatable. So, let's see. Let's take them in the order they will happen. And again, remember, this is the middle of a row. It's not showing the picture of the beginning. Go back and watch the brioche purl video for that. Since our focus is on color B, I'm going to color in color B with blue first. And then I will color in color A. Step 1 is going to be slipping a single stitch. Slipping it to the right needle, and once again, slipping it without twisting it, slipping it purlwise. An important thing to keep yourself on track is this slip. You will always be slipping the color you are not working with. I'll abbreviate that a little bit. So we're working with the blue color on this row. We are slipping the pink. On the other row, we were slipping the blue because that's not the color we were holding and working. Slipping that guy over. When we slip him over, here's what it will look like. Here is that slip stitch right there. There's the slip stitch from step 1. But let's finish color coding this. Again, I'm working with color B, so let me color in color B. And the alternating color, color A, is pink. Let's color that guy in too. Glancing back at this one of our things to keep in mind, the yarn needs to be in front before you slip a stitch. That naturally happens on the purl row. It's already there. When you purl, your yarn is in front. So it's already where it needs to be when the slip happens. It makes the yarn over happen correctly. So that is what step 2 is. You are wrapping this yarn. It's going to go over the needle and the slip stitch and back to the front. Over and around and back to the front. Here's what that will look like. Let's keep as much as we can of all of this in the frame. Hard to keep that guy up there, but here's what's going on. The last step is a brioche purl. We're going to purl the stitch and it's wrapped together. So just to point out, here is the result of that yarn over. I'll write it this way. This is the yarn over from the previous step right there, and you end up with your yarn in front where it needs to be. So let's color code once again. Here is currently where my yarn is. It has made its yarn over. And here's everything else that needs to be blue. Unless we forget, here's everything in color A, which is pink. For this step, what's going to happen is this yarn, which is in front, to do the brioche purl, I've stuck my needle through the stitch in its wrap, and now to brioche purl them together, this yarn, which is in front, is going to come up and over the needle and get pulled back through to brioche purl them together. That takes us back to step 1, where we slip a stitch and then we yarn over that slip stitch back to the front, and then we brioche purl. Slip, yarn over, burp. Slip, yarn over, burp, until the end of the row. Now a few other things to point out. Let's raise this guy up. Things to keep in mind for everything. Each row has a repeated phrase. You're always slipping purlwise, no matter what, on either of these rows. The yarn needs to be in front before a stitch is slipped. Means you got to move it on the knit row. It's already there on the purl row. You're always slipping the color you're not working with. Every slip stitch needs a wrap, and that wrap will be the other color. You can see both here, stitch and wrap, and here, stitch and wrap. So what you're brioche purling or knitting I don't have enough room to write all of this out, but the brioche purl and the brioche knit will always be 2 strands of different colors, like these pictures here and there. The stitch will be vertical. The wrap will be diagonal. Don't just grab 2 strands of different colors. Make sure you have a stitch and its wrap. Let's move on and see this with real yarn. Okay. I've knit a couple more rows and purled a couple more rows. I've worked a couple more rows since the beginning videos for this session. If you left off with section C, you just finished a knit row. I have just finished a purl row. I'd like to talk about these as knit rows and purl rows. So either do another purl row before you watch this, or wait until I hit the purl row to pick back up with where you are. If you're ever wondering when you get here and say, which one am I supposed to be doing? You can figure that out by looking back at what you've just completed. And what I've just completed, my knit stitches are really prominent on this side, right? My knit stitch has a wrap. My purl stitch does not. Knit stitch has a wrap, purl stitch does not. That indicates to me that I just purled a row because I wrapped my knit stitches. I didn't work my knit stitches. That indicates to me I just did a B row right here. And if I look at this one, the stitch with its wrap, as I start this, is a knit one. So I'm going to be brioche knitting. Remember, I only have one color doing one thing. So my color A is my brioche knit color. And that's what shows up as a knit stitch right here. So remember, on the drawing that I did, I said, remember, every knit row, you're going to start with your yarns in front and it's going to look weird. Find your color A. This is the only time it happens. We need to set the yarn to the back, not over. We need to just set it between the needles, wrap the base of this stitch, the last stitch from the last row. Wrap it to the back. We're really putting the brioche purl part back in place, but you don't need to process that. Just know that's what you want to do. Put your yarn to the back to start knitting. Slide my stitch marker over. Now remember, the mantra for a brioche knit row is bark or brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. So knit the stitch and its wrap together, yarn forward, slip. Make sure you're slipping a single stitch of the other color. Brioche knit, which creates a wrap here. Yarn forward. Make sure that you're slipping. You want to slip a single stitch. This wrap wanted to jump over that. Make sure you're slipping the one that is vertical. Brioche knit. Yarn forward. Slip. brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. Brioche knit should always be opposing colors, 2 different colors, stitch and wrap. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. We're going to keep doing this. And I might speed this one up a little, but not super fast so you can see. Again, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. I think me just speeding up because, again, I've mentioned having a mantra, saying it the whole time can really help. And if you stop and go, wait, where am I? Yarn's in front, slip stitch, time to start. Helps if you stop at the end of a mantra. So pick it back up again. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward. Again, here it's supposed to be a slip, but look at that. It almost looks like I've got a stitch and a wrap of the same color, but that's because they got slit up. If I pull them apart, I've got a single stitch here to slip. Take your time. I'm going fast, so this video is not a million miles long. Brioche knit, yarn forward, slip, brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. I'm nearing the end here. Here's my last repeat. Brioche knit, it's creating that wrap. Yarn forward, slip. Now remember what I said. The wraps are created by your brioche knits, but we're done. So this last one, you have to create your own wrap, taking it up and over the yarn and the needle and leaving your yarn hanging in front. If anything, I would leave it hanging over to the right. So this one's ready to go. That's also something where they can get twisted. Just leave it hanging right there. Now we're ready to go right into our brioche purl row. Let's get that ready and up there. So I'm going to pick up yarn B, only yarn B purls. And the mantra's different. It's slip, yarn over, brioche purl. Slip, yarn needs to be in front for a slip, but it already is because we're on a purl row. Yarn over, brioche purl, stitch in its wrap. Slip, yarn over, brioche purl. Slip, yarn over, brioche purl. For those who are continental knitters, you hold your yarn in your left hand. I had some examples of that in the other videos. Check them out. Slip, yarn over, back to the front, brioche purl. Slip, yarn over. You know my hands are in the way, but it came over and back to the front. It gives it a wrap. Brioche purl. Burp, slip, yarn over, burp. Slip, yarn over, burp. Slip, yarn over, burp. slip, yarn over, or wrap, burp. If you really want to take it down to as few phrases as possible, slip, wrap, burp. Slip, wrap, burp. Slip, wrap, burp. I'm going to speed up the rest of this row. Y'all can just watch. Here's my last repeat. Slip, wrap, burp. Remember, this is where things can fall away. When you go to start your knit row, wrap it around the base of the stitch to set it to start knitting, doing your brioche knit row. That again would be brioche knit, yarn forward, slip. Gonna stop right there. Any row you can eyeball and what should have happened in that row. Single stitches of the color you just worked, stitch of the other color with a wrap. Should always alternate like that. The other thing you should start to notice is on the outside of what you're knitting, you see really prominent V's of color A. And on the inside of what you're knitting, you'll see really prominent V's running down columns of color B. If they're broken in any way, something went weird. So there's our recap of brioche. Here is the outside, and here is the inside. You should see prominent V's of one color or the other, depending on which side you're looking at. I mentioned at the end of doing this with real yarn, if you see something else, if you see it broken in some way, something happened. And I will save that for another video for how to recognize mistakes and possibly correct them. This week is Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy belated Hanukkah to anyone who's practicing those. Merry Christmas for the holiday coming up. The shop is going to be closed Christmas through New Year's, basically. New Year's falls right on a weekend, so we won't be back until January 5th. I may or may not be able to keep these tips and tricks going during that time. The whole point is to get some rest. So we might have a week or two hiatus from these guys and pick back up with fixing your mistakes or recognizing when things have gone completely crazy in brioche until after the break. I also want to get going on brioche knitted flat and how that is different. Say you want to make a thin brioche scarf. It's pretty cool, but we move on from one color does one thing. It becomes knowing which side you're on for knowing what color does what. Different things on different sides. So, that being the case, either one of those is a good time to take a break. So, and pick back up again in the new year. We will see. If I have energy, I may be doing how to recognize mistakes in brioche. But there could very well be a 2-week break right now. Liz and I have not taken a break at all since the world fell apart. And I think we're a little overdue to make sure we can keep bringing you quality things like we're doing. So, we love you and we miss you. Please subscribe. That's a really great way to find these videos and be alerted when we pick back up again. Check out the sideshow if you want to hear Liz and I gabbing about what we're working on. That will also be taking a break during Christmas to New Year's, 25th. And check in with us about Zoom lessons. Come to Sit and Stitch if you can. All of that's taking a break during the holidays, but it can be a really great way to connect with people and connect with us. We would love to see you on Zoom. Check out our Facebook page for more information on events, or sign up for my newsletter. You can do that, I believe, through Facebook or on my website, sundragonartandfiber.com. Contact me with any questions you have, and may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Bye now. Even if it's on the floor, it's comfy, huh? Yeah, I know. You usually sit up there, but instead you're down here. Really old hand knit sweater. And that's the chair I'm gonna film in, so I really hope I don't bump you. Yeah, baby. Okay.